I was a foster dad to a troubled teen. Then my sister recognized his mom in one photo. Welcome back with a new real shock story. Before we start, comment and tell me which city you're watching from. To the end, don't forget to subscribe and rate it from 0 to 10. Let's enjoy the story, everyone. I never thought being a foster parent would change my life the way it did. I always thought I was just helping a kid, giving them a roof, some guidance, maybe a little love they'd been missing. I didn't expect the past to catch up. Not in the way it did. Not in a moment so sudden that it made my heart stop. I had taken in a boy named Ethan. He was 15, with tired eyes that seemed older than his years, and a silence that spoke louder than any words. He didn't talk much about his family, and I didn't press. Sometimes silence tells you more than conversations ever could. He had been through enough. I told myself that every time he flinched, every time he avoided my gaze, that he was just adjusting, but I didn't know that there was more waiting for me, more than I could ever prepare for. It started with a photograph. I didn't expect it to matter much at first. It was a simple photo Ethan carried in his wallet, folded just so, edges worn, like it had been carried everywhere. I had noticed him staring at it sometimes, his lips pressed together, thumb brushing the surface as if it held some secret he could never say aloud. One evening when I was cleaning his room, I picked it up to straighten his desk, and I saw a woman's face, a tired face, but with eyes that held fire. There was something about her that made my stomach twist, but I told myself it was nothing. She was just his mother. That's all. A woman who hadn't been in his life, a figure I only knew from one fragile photograph. I hadn't met her, and Ethan hadn't spoken her name aloud. I respected that. But I was curious. It was human nature. My sister, visiting for a weekend, noticed the photograph too. She looked at it once, then froze. I had never seen her like that before. Her face pale, eyes widening, fingers trembling as if she had touched something alive and dangerous at the same time. "I know her," she whispered, barely audible. I thought she was joking at first. Maybe she saw someone famous or a distant cousin. But her tone, the weight behind her words, told me she wasn't. She knew her. And that was when I realized this wasn't just about Ethan or me. Something buried in the past had followed us here. Something waiting in the shadows. The house we lived in was quiet, almost too quiet. Ethan's presence was like a weight in the rooms. A subtle tension that I had learned to live with. I would see him stare out the window at nothing, tapping his fingers on the windowsill, muttering numbers or names I didn't understand. At night, I would hear him pacing, quiet footsteps on the hardwood floors, the soft rustle of sheets as he slept, but never truly resting. I wanted to help, but I didn't know how. Every attempt at conversation, every question was met with silence or a shrug, and yet, I felt this invisible thread connecting me to him, pulling me deeper into a story I hadn't yet grasped. One afternoon, my sister and I were sorting through old papers in my office when she stopped, holding a folder I hadn't seen before. She opened it, and inside were documents, notes, names, and addresses. I barely recognized half of them, but one jumped out: Ethan's mother's name, the same as the woman in the photo. My heart began to race, my hands trembling as I realized what she was holding. She looked at me, eyes wide, voice shaking. She's not who you think she is. This is bigger than you know." I swallowed hard, a cold knot forming in my stomach. I wanted to run, to ignore it, to tell myself it didn't matter. But curiosity and dread tangled in my chest. I had to know the truth. That night, I sat in Ethan's room, watching him sleep, the photograph lying on his desk where I had returned it. I studied his face, the way his eyebrows furrowed even in sleep, the slight twitch of his lips, the tension in his jaw. How much had he seen? How much did he carry alone? I felt helpless, a caretaker in name only, unable to shield him from the shadows creeping in from a past I hadn't anticipated. And then it hit me. His story. Our story. The story of the people who had come before him was all tangled up in something I couldn't see fully yet. I felt the weight of it pressing down, not just on Ethan, but on me too. The following morning, I decided to ask Ethan about the photo. I approached him carefully, choosing my words, bracing myself for silence. But before I could speak, he looked up at me, eyes sharp, almost defiant, and said, "You don't know her. You don't know anything." And in that moment, I understood this wasn't a story he could share. He wasn't ready. And maybe I wasn't ready either. The truth was tangled, dangerous, a puzzle with pieces that could shatter lives if handled carelessly. From that day on, the house felt different. Shadows seemed darker, the quiet heavier, like every room held a secret waiting to surface. Every glance at the photograph, every whisper of his mother's name, every look from my sister, reminded me that this was only the beginning. I didn't know what would come next, but I knew one thing. Our lives had changed forever the moment that photograph entered them. The past had arrived in our home, silent but powerful, and there was no turning back. And yet, in the middle of this fear and uncertainty, I felt a strange kind of hope. Hope that by facing it, by walking this path with Ethan, we could survive what was coming. But I couldn't shake the question gnawing at me. What secrets had he been carrying all this time? And what would happen the moment they were revealed? I lay awake that night, staring at the ceiling, heart pounding, listening to the faint hum of the house settling around us. I knew deep down that whatever was about to unfold, it would test every boundary of trust, love, and courage I had. And I also knew with a sinking certainty that nothing and no one would ever be the same again. The next morning, I woke to the sound of rain tapping against the windows, soft but relentless, like the world itself was urging me to pay attention. Ethan was already up, sitting at the kitchen table with that same photograph in his hands, staring at it as if it were a puzzle he couldn't solve. I made coffee quietly, trying not to break the fragile calm, but I could feel the tension in the air. Something was coming, something I couldn't ignore, and I sensed Ethan knew it too. He didn't speak for a long time, just traced the edges of the photo with his finger, thumb brushing the worn surface over and over. I wanted to ask him about it, to pry gently, but I was scared of breaking whatever fragile trust we had built. He flinched at almost everything, my touch, my tone, even the sound of my footsteps. I realized that for him, the house wasn't a home, it was a fortress. And inside that fortress, he held secrets that I had no right to uncover, at least not yet. My sister's words from the day before kept echoing in my mind. "She's not who you think she is. This is bigger than you know." I didn't understand fully, but I could feel the truth hiding in the shadows. Something about Ethan's mother was dangerous, or at least complicated, in ways I couldn't grasp. I watched him move around the house, silent and cautious, as if the walls themselves might betray him. I couldn't help but feel guilty. I had promised him safety, and already the past was intruding, unraveling the fragile sense of security I thought I provided. Hours passed, and I finally decided I had to confront it, gently but firmly. "Ethan," I said, my voice low, careful, "you don't have to tell me everything, but I want you to know. I'm here. I want to understand." He looked up, eyes sharp and wary, and for a moment, I thought he might finally speak. But then he shook his head, almost violently, and whispered, "No, you don't get it. You can't." I swallowed hard, the knot in my stomach tightening. I knew he was right. I couldn't possibly understand. Not yet. Not without seeing what he had seen, feeling what he had felt. And yet, I also knew I couldn't turn back. Something was about to unfold. Something that would force both of us out of the safety of ignorance. The photograph was a key, a signal that the past wasn't done with him, with me, or with this house. Later that day, my sister returned with more information. She had been digging through records, quietly, trying to connect the dots without alarming Ethan. She laid them out on the kitchen counter, papers, notes, and old documents that told a story I wasn't prepared for. The woman in the photograph, Ethan's mother, was tied to something bigger than just her absence in his life. Her name had appeared in old legal records, court cases, mentions of disappearances, investigations that had never led anywhere. My heart raced as I pieced it together. Whatever Ethan had endured, it wasn't random. His mother's life had intersected with forces I couldn't yet understand. And those forces had now found a way to touch him, and by extension, me. Ethan's world, the quiet tension I had felt from the beginning, began to make sense in small, terrifying ways. Every time he flinched, every time he avoided contact, it wasn't just fear of strangers. It was fear of history repeating itself. Fear that the secrets he carried were too dangerous to confront. I watched him pace in his room later that evening, back and forth like a caged animal, and I realized something crucial. He was waiting. Waiting for something to happen, something he knew would arrive, even if I didn't. By nightfall, the storm outside had grown heavier, wind rattling the old windows, rain hammering the roof. I could hear Ethan moving, soft footsteps in the hall, a door closing gently, then silence. I went to check on him, and that's when I saw the note slipped under his bedroom door, folded in the way the photograph had been folded. I picked it up, hands trembling, my sister's warnings echoing in my mind. It was brief, almost too simple to seem meaningful, but the weight behind the words was undeniable. It said, "She's coming back. Be ready." I froze. My heart pounded so loudly I thought it would betray me. My mind raced with questions. Who was coming? His mother? Or someone else? And what would happen when they arrived? For the first time, I understood that Ethan's past wasn't just a memory, it was an active, living threat. And now it was here, in our home, in our lives, and I had no choice but to confront it. I went to his room, gently knocking on the door, and when he opened it, I saw fear etched across his face, but also something else, determination. He wasn't just a scared kid anymore. He had steel in his eyes, a readiness I hadn't seen before. He handed me the photograph, the same one that had caused all this tension, and said simply, "You need to see what I've seen." I nodded, swallowing my fear. And together, we sat down. He began to tell me fragments of the story, the moments he had tried to bury, the truths he had tried to forget. And as he spoke, I realized that the photograph wasn't just a memory, it was a warning, a connection to events that were far from over. The room felt heavy with history, with pain, with secrets that had clawed their way into our lives, demanding attention. By the time he finished, I understood that our lives had irrevocably changed. I couldn't shield him from the past, but I could stand beside him. And in that moment, I felt a strange, fragile hope that maybe, just maybe, together we could face whatever was coming. But the tension didn't fade. The note, the storm outside, the shadows in the corners of the room, they all reminded me that the worst was yet to come. And so, we waited. Not in fear alone, but in quiet preparation. Every sound, every shadow, every flicker of the light became a potential signal. I didn't know what the next day would bring, or the day after that, but I knew one thing: the arrival of the past had changed everything, and we had to face it, together, or risk losing more than we could imagine. The next morning, the storm had passed, leaving the world wet and cold, but the tension in the house remained thick, almost suffocating. Ethan barely slept, I could tell, and I hadn't either. There was a heaviness in the air, an unspoken understanding that the note we found wasn't just a warning. It was a countdown. Every creak of the floorboards, every gust of wind outside made me flinch. I kept thinking about what Ethan had said the night before. "You need to see what I've seen." I had no idea what that meant yet, but I knew it was about to change everything. He led me to the attic, a place I hadn't explored since we moved in. The stairs groaned under our weight, and the air smelled like damp wood and dust. At the top, he opened an old trunk that had clearly been untouched for years. Inside were stacks of papers, old photographs, and a few faded letters. I could feel the weight of the past pressing down on me as I peered over his shoulder. Every photograph told a story, Every letter carried a secret, and every piece of evidence pointed to one thing. His mother's life had been far more complicated and dangerous than either of us had ever imagined. Ethan's hands trembled as he picked up one photograph in particular. It was of his mother, standing in front of a house that looked familiar but different in its decay. Her expression was stern, almost angry, and there was a hint of fear in her eyes. "This is where it started," he said quietly. I didn't need him to explain further. I could feel it. The danger, the tension, the tragedy. The woman in the photo wasn't just absent from his life. She was running from something or someone, and that had left scars that ran deeper than I could see. As we sifted through the trunk, I realized that the story Ethan had lived was layered with lies, secrets, and half-truths. Each letter hinted at betrayals, manipulations, and people who had disappeared without a trace. I could see why he had trusted no one, why he had built walls so high that even I had struggled to climb them. But now, those walls weren't enough. The past had found a way in, slipping through cracks, whispering threats that neither of us could ignore. I wanted to ask him why he hadn't told anyone before, why he had carried all of this alone, but the words stuck in my throat. Instead, I just watched, silent, as he uncovered more photographs. Some with familiar faces, some with strangers, all pointing to the same conclusion. The events that had shaped his life were not random, and the people involved were still out there, somewhere, waiting. By mid-afternoon, we had unearthed the entire story. The truth was worse than I could have imagined. Ethan's mother had been involved with dangerous people who didn't forgive, didn't forget. And somehow, that danger had followed him, threaded its way into his life, and now into mine. The realization hit me like a punch to the chest. This wasn't just about a troubled teen, it was about survival, trust, and confronting the shadows of a past that refused to stay buried. As evening approached, the tension only grew. We were both quiet, but our silence was heavy with anticipation. I kept glancing at the window, half expecting someone to appear on the driveway, half expecting the past itself to manifest. Ethan sat on the couch, the photographs spread around him like pieces of a dangerous puzzle. "I can't run from this anymore," he said finally, voice tight with emotion. "I have to face it. And you're part of it now." "I'm sorry," I didn't respond immediately. There was nothing I could say that would make this less terrifying, less real. Instead, I sat down beside him, letting him lean on me in a way he hadn't allowed anyone in years. It was a fragile connection, a fleeting moment of trust, but it was enough to remind me why I was here, why I couldn't turn away, even when the truth was so heavy it threatened to crush me. Later that night, the phone rang. A single call, no message, no name, just a voice on the other end that sent shivers down my spine. "You shouldn't be there," it said. "Leave, or there will be consequences." My heart raced. Ethan grabbed the phone from my hands, eyes wide with fear and recognition. "They know we're here," he whispered. The weight of the threat pressed down on us, sharper and more immediate than the past we had been uncovering. We spent the rest of the night preparing, locking doors, checking windows, moving furniture to block entrances. Every creak, every shadow, every gust of wind made us flinch, reminded us that this was real. That the past wasn't just a memory, it was a presence, alive and dangerous. I realized then that our lives had changed irreversibly. There would be no return to normal, no safe space untouched by history. We had stepped into a story that demanded our full attention, and it would not let go easily. Morning came, gray and heavy with clouds. We sat at the kitchen table, exhausted. The photographs and letters spread around us. Ethan's mother was still a mystery. Her motives, her choices, her absences. None of it fully explained. And yet, the trail she left was clear enough to warn us, to prepare us. I could see in Ethan's eyes that he knew the confrontation was coming, the moment where the past would collide with the present, where all the secrets would demand answers. I clenched my hands, trying to steady my nerves. I didn't know if we were ready, but I knew one thing. We had to know if we were ready. but I knew one thing. We had no choice. The story had begun long before I arrived, but now I was part of it and there was no stepping back. The shadows that had haunted Ethan's life were moving closer, and we would have to face them together. By the time night fell again, we were ready in the only way possible. Alert, wary, and united. The house felt smaller, each creak and groan louder, more menacing. Every shadow seemed alive. And somewhere, beyond the walls, beyond the familiar streets, the past was coming to find us. The night felt alive with menace. Every shadow in the house seemed to stretch, twist, and crawl toward us, and the wind outside sounded like whispers, like someone speaking just out of earshot. Ethan and I moved silently through the rooms, our eyes darting to every corner, every dark space. My heart was pounding so hard I thought it might give me away, and I could see it in Ethan's face. He was terrified, but he wouldn't let it show completely. This was it, the moment when the past, hidden and patient, would strike. It started with a soft tap on the window upstairs, just a tap, not loud, not threatening enough to make sense, but heavy enough to freeze us in place. We exchanged a glance. I could see the recognition in Ethan's eyes. "They're here," he whispered. My stomach dropped. I wanted to scream, to run, to hide, but there was nowhere to go. The house had always felt like a sanctuary, but now it was a trap. Every door and hallway a reminder of our vulnerability. We tried to stay calm, moving toward the staircase, listening for more signs. Then came the knock at the front door. 3 solid, deliberate knocks, each one echoing through the house like a drumbeat. The sound was familiar to Ethan, and I could see the fear flare in his eyes. He grabbed my hand, a quick, desperate squeeze, and whispered, "Do not go alone. Stay with me." I nodded, barely breathing as he reached for the old baseball bat we had found in the storage closet. The front door creaked as it opened slightly on its own, revealing a shadow, tall and imposing. I couldn't see the face, but the presence radiated danger. My pulse raced as the figure stepped closer, each movement deliberate, slow, and terrifyingly calm. Ethan's grip on my hand tightened, and I could feel his tension running through me, electrifying, impossible to ignore. I wanted to speak, to reason, but no words could exist in this charged silence. Then, the figure spoke, a voice distorted, unfamiliar but carrying a weight that froze me to the spot. "You shouldn't have dug so deep." The words weren't just a threat, they were an accusation, a judgment, a history of anger and revenge that had waited decades to find us. Ethan moved in front of me instinctively, shielding me, and the adrenaline coursing through my veins made my hands shake violently. Every instinct screamed to run, to hide, but my feet were rooted. I had to witness this. I had to be part of it. Suddenly, more movement, a shadow in the hallway, another at the back door. They were surrounding us. I felt a chill crawl up my spine, and the air felt thick, heavy, almost solid. My mind raced. Every photograph, every letter, every secret we had uncovered, they had known we would find it. And now they were here, intent on controlling the story. Ethan whispered, almost to himself, "We can't let them take us down. Not now. Not after everything." I saw him move toward the hallway, bat in hand, and I followed, stepping carefully over the scattered photographs on the floor. The intruders, I realized they were more than one, and their coordination was frightening, advanced slowly as if they had rehearsed this confrontation for years. One figure paused, staring directly at Ethan, and I saw recognition flash in the intruder's eyes. This wasn't random. This was personal. The tension exploded in a sudden, deafening crash. One of the intruders tried to force their way in through the side door, and Ethan swung the bat with everything he had. The sound of it connecting reverberated through the house. A sickening, yet liberating, confirmation that we weren't helpless. I ran to help, my hands grabbing at anything I could to block, push, hold, survive. Chaos consumed the room, shouts, movement, the smell of fear thick in the air. I saw faces now, not just shadows. Anger, recognition, resentment. They were people from the past, people we had only glimpsed in photographs, letters, and memories. They carried years of bitterness, every injustice, every secret, every betrayal, and now it was all directed at us. My body trembled, not just from fear, but from the raw intensity of what was unfolding. This was the culmination, the turning point where the past collided violently with the present, and there was no hiding from it. One intruder lunged at Ethan. I screamed, a raw, guttural sound that seemed to pierce the room. Instinct took over. Grabbing a heavy lamp, I swung it, hitting him squarely in the shoulder. He staggered, giving Ethan the split second he needed to strike back. Time slowed, each second stretching impossibly long. I could feel my heart beating in my throat, hear every breath, every shift of weight, every tiny movement. The world outside ceased to exist. There was only us and the storm we had unleashed by uncovering the past. Finally, a pause. Everyone froze, every muscle taut, every eye wide. I realized we were staring each other down, not strangers, but people tied together by history, by secrets, by the echoes of actions long past. The air was electric, almost unbearable. And in that moment, I understood something vital. This wasn't just about fear or survival. It was about truth, reckoning, finally facing the consequences that had waited decades to arrive. Then, the intruders retreated, slowly, deliberately, disappearing back into the shadows from which they had emerged. The silence that followed was deafening. I sank to the floor, hands shaking, lungs burning, tears streaming down my face. Ethan knelt beside me, pulling me close, holding me as if to keep both of us tethered to reality. The battle was over, but the weight of the climax, the intensity of what we had survived, pressed down on us, leaving us shaken to our core. I realized then that this night had changed everything. The secrets, the lies, the betrayals, they had erupted in full force, and we had survived. Somehow, against the odds, we had faced the darkest shadows of the past and come out alive, though not untouched. And as I looked at Ethan, seeing the same exhaustion, the same relief, the same unspoken understanding, I knew that the next chapter wouldn't be about fear. It would be about reckoning, reflection, and the impact of confronting what was once buried, hidden, and ignored. The house was quiet now, almost unnervingly so. Every creak of the floorboards, every whisper of wind through the broken windows felt louder than ever. Ethan and I sat on the living room floor, surrounded by the scattered photographs and letters that had brought so much chaos into our lives. And for the first time, I allowed myself to breathe. My chest ached from the adrenaline, from the fear, from the sheer intensity of what we had just endured. I realized that this wasn't just about surviving the night. It was about understanding everything that had led us here, about facing the shadows that had haunted generations. I looked at Ethan, his face pale, but his eyes steady and strong. There was relief there, yes, but also a deep understanding, a silent acknowledgement that we had survived something bigger than ourselves. "We made it," he whispered. And it wasn't just about escaping the intruders. We had made it through the weight of secrets, the reckoning of lies, the storm of truths that had been buried for decades. I nodded, feeling the tears burn behind my eyes, a mix of exhaustion and release washing over me. The house, abandoned and dark, felt different now. It wasn't just a relic of the past. It was a testament. Every photograph we had uncovered, every letter we had read, every story we had uncovered pointed to something bigger. A family fractured by secrets, by misunderstandings, by the choices of those who came before us. And yet, it was also a reminder of resilience, of the courage it takes to face the truth, no matter how frightening. I realized that the fear we had felt was real, but so was the power we discovered in confronting it. I walked through the hallway slowly, touching the walls, seeing the echoes of the past in every corner. I thought of the troubled teen we had taken in, the boy whose life was tangled with pain and neglect, whose future depended on understanding his past. Now, everything made sense. The anger, the confusion, the mistrust, they weren't his alone. They were a legacy, a chain of events and choices that had shaped him, just as they had shaped the intruders and even us. And in facing that legacy, we found something vital: clarity, compassion, and the possibility of change. Ethan and I gathered the remaining letters and photographs, organizing them carefully. I realized that these pieces weren't just evidence. They were stories, lives lived, mistakes made, lessons learned. The chaos of the night had given way to reflection, and in that reflection, I found a strange peace. It wasn't perfect and it wasn't complete, but it was real. I understood now that confronting the past didn't erase it, didn't fix everything, but it did offer understanding, perspective, and the chance to break cycles of pain and misunderstanding. Sitting back down, I let my thoughts wander to the boy, to his mother, to all the connections that had brought us to this moment. There was a clarity in knowing that the story didn't end with fear or confrontation. It ended with awareness, with the acknowledgement that life is messy, complex, and full of consequences we cannot always control. But in facing those consequences and acknowledging them, there is hope. Hope for healing, hope for understanding, hope for moving forward despite the scars of the past. I felt a deep sense of gratitude for surviving, for witnessing, for being part of something larger than myself. The night had tested every ounce of courage I had, but it had also revealed resilience I didn't know existed. I understood now that true bravery isn't about never being afraid. It's about acting in spite of fear, about standing tall when the world seems ready to collapse around you. I thought of Ethan, and I knew we had both grown stronger in ways that would last a lifetime. Looking out the window at the rising sun, painting the abandoned house in hues of gold and pink, I felt a quiet resolve settle over me. The past had been painful, messy, and complicated, but it no longer had the power to control us. We had faced it, we had survived it, and we had learned from it. And in that learning, I saw a path forward, not just for us, but for the boy, for our family, for anyone who had ever carried the weight of secrets and misunderstandings. I spoke aloud, though no one could hear me beyond the walls of the house. This is more than survival. This is understanding. This is growth. And in that moment, I realized that every fear we faced, every shadow we confronted, every secret we uncovered had led us here not just to safety, but to clarity, to compassion, to the ability to make better choices moving forward. As we packed the last of the photographs and letters, ready to leave the house that had been both prison and teacher, I felt a strange sense of closure. The intruders, the chaos, the tension, it had all served a purpose. We had survived, yes, but we had also witnessed, learned, and transformed. And in that transformation, I saw a chance for redemption, for healing, and for connection. The night's terror had given way to understanding, and that understanding was a gift far greater than fear could ever take away. Stepping outside, the morning air felt fresh, almost miraculous after the suffocating intensity of the night. The house loomed behind us, still imposing, still full of echoes, but it no longer held the same power. We had faced it, we had faced each other, and we had faced ourselves. And now we could move forward, carrying the lessons of the past without letting them define our future. I looked at Ethan, at the boy, and felt a quiet determination settle within me. Life would always be complicated, messy, and full of unexpected challenges. But now I knew that courage isn't measured by absence of fear. It's measured by the willingness to face it, to confront what is difficult, to act with compassion and understanding despite the uncertainty. And in that courage, I found hope, resilience, and the unshakable truth that even in the darkest nights, there is a way forward.